I speak mostly at middle schools and grade schools, lots and lots of them. And usually it's in a gymnasium or a cafeteria or what's called a cafetorium. Maybe some of you probably, this is a good crowd, you guys know what that is. Lots of people I tell that to, and they're, what is it, like science fiction? And so big groups, and it's amazing how much can come unglued really quickly when you're talking to 300 seventh graders. Very often, there'll be somebody sitting in a very strategic spot. You can tell they've chosen it strategically so that a teacher can't get to them without it being kind of a hassle, and they're waving their arm in a way that says, if you don't answer my question before you give this long, boring talk, I'm not going to live through this presentation. Right? They've got this look on their face. So I get a lot of that, got to get them calmed down. Audio systems are not really what they're cracked up to be in a gymnasium. You probably know this. I actually had a 4th grade heckler. He's out there. He's in California. And let me tell you, he's good. He knows how to kind of hide it. It was a rough day. So I love going and talking to kids. I wouldn't do so much of it if I didn't. But it's nice to talk to a room full of nothing but grown-ups. It's actually a nice change. And just share a little bit with you about just what I've experienced over the last 8 years, and I've gone to over 1,000 different schools in 8 years, and kind of what I've seen and how that's changed my writing. I've written 20 books, and my first one was published in 2003, and at that time, I had actually just done a 5-year stint in technology. I was running a technology company, and I kind of saw writing books for kids as, I don't know, my penance maybe. I was feeling really soulless. I don't know what it was, but I came out of that experience. It was right during the dot-com revolution, and I felt like I just want to get away from technology and do something that will make me feel like I'm on a mission to save kids. And writing books for kids was how I was going to do that. Words on actual paper. And so book was done, first book, and so then I started going out. This was the first book. And I started going out and visiting schools, which I discovered very early on that I really enjoyed a lot. I had never done it. I started going that first year. I went to 150 different schools. And I loved talking with young people about the things that were distracting them, what going to school was like, what kinds of things they like to read. And I just kind of got in my car and started driving. And the thing I liked probably more than anything else about going to schools was sometimes after the talk and getting a group of students around and just talking with them about what they were experiencing, what they liked about books and what they didn't. And in that first year, the things that I was seeing that were distracting kids the most, this is going to sound like a real throwback, really one of the biggest ones was TV back in 2003. I still got that a lot when I said, well, what are you doing instead of reading books? Or watching TV. And for the boys, video games were very big back then. But during the couple of years after that, I went to 300 more schools. And it was really apparent very quickly that the internet was becoming the go-to thing to do in their free time. And then as you can see by this chart, in the couple of years after that, iPods became very popular in that. It was weird. It kind of was before that and a little bit after, but I think what happened was a lot of older siblings and parents were passing down their old generation iPods, and a lot of 3rd and 4th and 5th graders were getting a hold of these things, and it became sort of a phenomenon in that stretch. I also remember about 2006, 2008, that stretch, that it was maybe the only time while I was out there where I felt like kids really were starting to feel like the wheels were coming off. I had a feeling that kids were having a hard time containing all of this entertainment media. They just were having a rough time of it. By the time 2009, 2010, just in the last couple of years, as you know, technology has a way of hiding its best thing for last. And I really would not have thought that there was that much more that could distract kids that they hadn't come up with already. And of course, then I started seeing cell phones in the hands of 8th graders and 7th graders and 6th graders. And as we know, lots of 3rd graders have cell phones now. So that was probably the biggest thing that came along. And here's what's really interesting that I like to talk about with this slide. TV is back. Isn't that weird? And why is that? You'd think it would be at the very bottom because it's kind of old tech. But there's this explosion in programming on TV with all these cable channels for kids. And so I hear a lot of kids saying, well, I just watch this and I watch that and I watch the other. So don't think TV has left. They're in the fight to keep kids' attention too. I do a test with kids, and I'd love to do it in this room. It's a great room to do it in. And it's called the high five test. And you probably can guess what this is. I say this to kids, and I just did this 4 days ago via Skype with a group of 50 kids in Florida. They were all 7th graders, and I'll tell you the results after we do it here in this room. So 5 things. It's those 5 things. Just yesterday, how many of those things did each of you do? I'll just have them tick them off on their fingers. But if you could tick off on your fingers, how many people watched TV, went on the internet, used an iPod, an iPad, or an iTouch, played a video game, including Farmville, and Angry Birds, and iSlash, things like that. Girls are also getting really into video games, partly because of those kind of things. And who watch TV? And I sadly can give you a high five. Only a couple. Wow, I'm so disappointed in you guys. Oh, whoa. Okay. That group of kids in Florida, I got 43 high fives, I got 5 high fours, and I got the last 2 with the high 3. And most of the schools that I go to in the last 6, 8, 9 months, I'm getting 70+% of kids saying, yeah, well, sure, I do all those things. And they're waving at me like it's a good thing, like they won a prize. So I guess I feel like when I look at this next slide I'm going to show you, it's no wonder they've got a lot of time to fill, because the latest Kaiser Foundation study in 2010 showed that kids are spending over 7.5 hours a day using entertainment media. And if you factor in this idea of them doing 2 things at once, which they all do, if they're texting and watching TV at the same time, it jumps to 11 hours. They're only awake for 15. It's an amazing statistic. And so you can probably imagine that somewhere along the way, I kind of had to make peace with my technological background. I wrote a whole bunch of books that were straight-up books. And the day came where I felt like I was just seeing too many students that were reading below grade level. And the reason they were doing that was because in their free time, books were not making their top 5. It was happening way, way too much. So I had to start thinking about, is there a way that I could combine these things? And I love studies like this because they give us something to sort of all look at in a context, right? But there's something you can get from sitting down in cafeteria after cafeteria, just across from kids, and just straight up asking them, what's it going to take to get you to turn more pages? And it turns out there are actually a lot of things. And I'm going to show you 3 of them right now. So I'm going to grab a little bit of water. This is the first one. And the short answer, or the short version of what this is this is a book and a movie at the same time. And basically what a kid does is they open this up and they read about 20 pages. And when they get to that next page, all there is a blank sheet of paper. It has a web address and a password. And this book's asks them, set the book down, it's fine. They go online, they put the password in at a site, and it unlocks part of the story. They get to watch it like a little movie. They watch about 3 minutes of the story like a little movie. And it's spooky and it's fun, and somebody's out there with a camera finding all this ghostly stuff. And you go back and forth 9 times throughout this book, so that about every 20 pages they get to, there's like a carrot out there. And it's true, when they get done, they will have watched about 45 minutes of a movie. But they'll also have read over 200 pages. And so I'm kind of okay with that. And this has been very popular with a lot of kids who are, I think actually these kind of things are bringing kids back who haven't read for a long time. We've got plenty of kids, and I get that this is an audience where there are many private schools represented, and it's hard to imagine a lot of those kids not doing very much reading, but go into an inner city school with 1,000 kids in it. A lot of them are not reading, and this is bringing them back. It's like a lifeline. It also turns out that the passwords that they use, they really matter. I didn't think it through that much. I knew I wanted to have cool passwords, but this is one of those things that if you ask any educator, you guys know this, if we can get a kid to go off on their own and sort of dig deeper, we're winning. And so these passwords, I get emails probably about once every 2 weeks from some young reader who will say, hey, Mr. Carman, I was looking online and Lucy Westenra, that's Dracula's first victim. Thought you'd want to know. I actually get a lot of that. It's like, okay. And how great is that? So they're off kind of digging around, finding all the passwords in these books, and there are 4 of them now. They lead them back into the sort of the history, the Gothic history of literature and all these great old characters and old movies, and they're going and they're continuing on. 39 Clues is one that probably a lot of people have heard about. The thing that I love most about this series is if I get into a room of 200 5th or 4th and 5th graders, and I tell them what this is and they understand what it is, their eyes just light up. I just love to see young people being like, wow. When they understand that this is 10 books by 7 different writers that write, they already know the names of these writers. They know that they're going to write something adventurous and fun and interesting. And when they open up the book, there's going to be a little secret panel in there that if they dig in there, they're going to pull out collectible trading cards. And they can take those online, put the numbers into a huge online elaborate game system with millions of other kids, and become part of the story and actually be the ones actually looking for a lot of these clues. I mean, their eyes just light up. And I do want to make one point here because I hear from a lot of educators. I'll tell you what it is in a second. But I think that no amount of technology can save a bad story. And we got to remember that you can throw a lot of hardware at a bad story and it's still like, oh my God, it's just a bad story. And so you have to start with that. And 39 Clues is a great story. And so teachers will say to me, wow, such a great story. But they'll also say, you know what's getting them in? It's the tech that's getting them in. And maybe the books are holding them, but the tech is playing a really big role in getting these kids to pick up these books. I'm going to show you one more thing, and I'll just about be done here. This is 3:15. It's not even out yet. It comes out on 3:15. And this is a good example of how, if we're smart about it, and if we are the leaders and not, in this case, not the kids, if we think about, well, how can we turn this to our advantage? How can we turn technology to our advantage so kids actually turn more pages? Short stories are not really that in vogue for a 5th grader. But this is a chance to kind of bring it back. Because the 3 in this logo stands for listen, read, and watch. And the 15 stands for you do the whole thing in 15 minutes or less. This is actually going to launch on phones as an app for Android or for an iPad or for whatever. It'll do that first, and then it'll come out through Scholastic in the fall. But the kids can choose through a whole bunch of stories. They pick the one they want to do, then they got to do it in order. So they got to listen. They have this, it's very Twilight Zone. They're kind of spooky stories. Kids love spooky stuff. So they get to listen to someone sort of introduce the story for them. But then it is their job. They're going to have to read. They're going to flip through probably 20 pages on a phone and obviously fewer on a bigger device. But they got to go through and do that reading part. And then they get to watch the big spooky payoff. This one's about a guy with a hook for a hand. Sorry, little sound effects there. All right, we're getting close to the end. You guys are doing great. This is, I'm gonna do a reading because that's what writers do. We do readings. But in the spirit of TED, this is going to be a 30-second reading. It's very short. I get a lot of emails. I just want to read this one. My wife said I should read this one because she said there's something missing. There's just not enough heart in this talk. So I'm just going to read this very short little email, and hopefully it'll put it into perspective. I'm a reading specialist who services 6th graders reading below grade level. At the beginning of the school year, my students were given a survey. 10 of 67 students stated that they enjoyed reading and read on a regular basis, just 10. I introduced Skeleton Creek, your multimedia series, to my students, and I was amazed at the response. As the weeks continued, I was asked on a daily basis if we would be reading the story and watching the videos. In their free time, Skeleton Creek was all they talked about. At computer time, students were watching the videos and pointing out things to each other that they hadn't noticed before. They looked up passwords and debated the meaning of the story. Discussions about the story overflowed into the hallway and the lunchroom. Every morning I was surrounded with students who wanted to talk about nothing but this book. Happy writer. As I write this, I have an ESL student who has taken my copy of the book and read it to his mother who can't read English. This particular student has informed me that this is the first book he has ever read on his own. When we finished, I took another survey asking the same students if they would read another book in the same format on their own. 67 out of 67 students replied no. They replied yes. And that's from Pamela. That would have kind of blown the whole thing, wouldn't it? All right. Anyway, just to close really quick. I actually hope that people just like you and, publishers, other writers like myself, anybody who is sort of in the business of trying to get kids to keep turning pages, because it is really important that they do, right? I actually hope that we all keep doing a lot of the same stuff, because I think at least 75% of books, I think, should still be traditional books. There's so much to be gained from that. But if we could just take that other 25% and spend a little less time trying to stand out and a little more trying to blend in, I actually think that we're going to reach every kid with books. It'll get into their top 5, right, for every kid every day. Thank you.